Welcome back, everybody. It's time for another episode of All My Modular. So this is episode 4. This is CV sources. Really, it's sort of an odd category. I've got sequencers and LFOs and function generators, and I sort of lumped in clocks. It's hard to evenly distribute all your modules into categories for discussion in a forum like this. So that's just what I've got, and I hope it will keep you interested. So to start off, I've got the Make Noise Maths. This is a modular classic. It's been around for a long time. It's one of the first modules I bought. It is billed as an analog computer, which makes complete sense. I actually sometimes think of the entire modular system as one giant analog computer, even if it has some digital components. But in any case, this module is quite the Swiss Army knife. It will make an LFO. It can do envelopes. You can turn it into an oscillator. It's a mixer. It's an inverter. It's got logic built in. And it really comes in handy just at the most unexpected times. You need something and you're like, oh gosh, I really wish I had, fill in the blank. And there's math sitting there which can do that particular function. So I never plan to use it, but it's always patched by the time I've got a full patch going in my system. The only downside, I guess, would be that it is rather large, and I'm sure you can get similar functions in a smaller space, but it's just so versatile, and I don't mind the form factor, really. It's something I've gotten used to. It's easy to grab these knobs, and it's a good reminder that, hey, you've got something here that could fix whatever problem you're having. So it's a little intimidating for people who are first getting into modular, because it doesn't work on what you typically think of as musical ideas. It's more sort of mathematical. But once you start playing with modular for a while, there's a bridge there where you can start to think of a musical and mathematical idea together. And maths really starts to shine once you start playing with it like that. The next module is the Joranalogue Contour 1. This is it's an envelope generator and a slew limiter. And it's just one envelope, an attack and a decay. So you might think, well, why do I need to use something for that one function? I've got another module that has a bunch of envelopes on it. For me, it's the way you can precisely control the slope of both the attack and decay portions. Everything is controllable. You've got separate gate and trigger ins. You've got an inverted output. It's really, it's taking the idea of one simple envelope and then saying, well, let's really open it up and give you all this control over it. So that's very nice. Got nothing bad to say about it at all. The next module is the DivKid øchd. This is 8 analog LFOs in 4 HP. It's specifically designed to have LFOs that do not synchronize with each other. Anytime you want to make sure things just aren't lining up the beats, when things are a little more flowy, less beat oriented, this really fits the bill. It's great for generative stuff. It's great for ambient stuff, and works in just about any patch. You'll find something to do with it. This next module is the Acid Rain Technology Maestro. This is sort of a constructor kit of complex LFOs. So you string together different shapes and you save them as presets in 6 different channels. There's a lot more going on really than just that description. It can get kind of deep, but I tend to use it just when I want a sort of periodic warbling sound or some loosely rhythmically tied LFOs to the rest of the mix. Sometimes a little warble in pitch. You never really know. I don't do a lot of concentrated construction. Like, I don't plan out really very much, like say, oh, I want, 2 beats of this square wave and then 1 beat. I don't really do that. I sort of play around and I keep a bunch of different speeds and shapes sort of loaded up. And when I get bored of them, I just punch in something else. It's a lot of fun to play with, and I do use it a lot. It's rather wide, and there is a lot to learn. This is something you're going to want to really study the manual on, have the manual handy until you really get used to it. There's really kind of no way around that. But I do recommend it. It's a great module. This next module is the Joranalogue Orbit 3. It's an LFO, I suppose. It's a chaotic LFO. It can actually also work in audio rate. I tend to use it more for low frequencies, just to help. It's great with generative stuff, just to play with different parameters, open filters up, close them down, sort of in this chaotic manner. The interesting thing about this chaos module is the ability to reset the chaos output, which to me adds a really nice little extra element to what you can do with this, because if you, for example, have it reset every 8 bars in your music, you're going to get an interesting chaotic shape that just kind of repeats and sort of becomes a part of this whatever you're building rhythmically. Interesting self-patching you can do with this, especially in the audio range. You can get some really noisy, interesting oscillator sounds. So a lot to play with here, and I use it in every patch. The next module is ALM Busy Circuits, Pamela's New Workout. Now, this is not the latest version in this series. There is now a Pamela's Pro Workout, which improves upon a couple of features and gives you a nicer display. But I'll just talk about this one because this is the one I have, and this is really a good time to pick one up, actually, because you can probably find them fairly cheaply in the used market. This, I use this as my main clock. It's got a lot of things you can do rhythmically. There are LFOs, there's random wave shapes. You can do Euclidean rhythms with it, sample and hold. There's built-in quantizer. I mean, it's really, really full-featured for anything you want to think about in a rhythmic sense. And so I consider it the conductor of my orchestra, and it's the very first thing I patch in when I start building a patch, unless I've just sort of been sound sculpting with an oscillator or something. But when I'm sitting down to make a piece of music, I start there and I start thinking about how the beats are going to work, the tempo, and start dividing up some of the duties in these 8 different channels to give me control over everything else in my system. So if you don't have this or the newer Pro Workout, I highly, highly recommend getting something like this to pull everything in, get all of your modules playing together in a friendly way. The next module I'd like to talk about is the 4MS company rotating clock divider. And here I'll be talking about also with the breakout module that goes with it, which if you do pick up the clock divider, I highly recommend also picking out the breakout module. Otherwise, you've sort of got to plan out how you want to use it and set some jumpers on the back. But as to the clock divider itself, I find it very useful to break down like a central beat into other parts and distribute those other divisions to different parts of my system. I don't use the rotation function so much. So what that does is it changes the outputs of the different divisions in a rotational fashion. So if you put a little bit of CV in there to start the rotation, it pushes the divide by 2 into the divide by 3, all the way up to the divide by 8, which comes back around to the beginning again. And I suppose you could use that to do some ratcheting. I don't use that function very much at all. As a clock divider, it's perfectly functional, nothing special. But it is necessary in what I do. The next module is the DivKid RND Step. This is 6 outputs of sample and hold. It's interesting in that the built-in noise that it samples from is pink noise, which distributes the output voltages in a different way than you typically would get, what you typically would see off these sample and hold units. There's a way to get 6 completely different random signals out, although there are actually 3 pairs of outputs. There are 3 unipolar outputs and 3 bipolar outputs. This is just a super, super useful module. So if you need a bunch of random, or if you want to do the other type of sample and hold where you put in your own signal to sample, it's great for that too. It's just who doesn't need sample and hold? Who doesn't need random? So highly recommend it. This next module is Stochastic Instruments, Stochastic Inspiration Generator. And this module holds a very special place in my heart. This is, if I were a module designer, this is the sort of thing I would be trying to make. And I'm so happy that somebody made something like this. This has a mind of its own in the best possible way. It's great for generating melodies. You could do 4 parts at once. And there's so much control over the different parts of that melody that you want to give up to chance. So pitches, which can be distributed however you like across the 12 tones. You've got note duration, you can do glides, you can do rests, you can control how heavily weighted 8th notes versus 16th notes are, and there are various looping options. This thing is super, super deep and super, super playable. I think of it as my duet partner, and it surprises me all the time. I mean, really, that's my favorite thing about Modular, is being surprised by my own patches. And time and again, this little guy does the trick. And you'll see it featured in a lot of my videos that I have on this channel. The next module is Malekko Heavy Industry Voltage Block. This is an 8-track 16-step sequencer with control over a lot of attributes. There's a built-in quantizer. In many ways, this is a standard sequencer. One thing I really like about it is step addressable. So I tend to use it as a very slow sequencer. Take a step every 8 or 16 bars and just sort of change the harmony a little bit with some of the outputs. So it's a good module. The last module I'd like to talk about is the Qubit Bloom. This is a sequencer. It's built as a fractal sequencer. And this is fairly early purchase for me, my first sequencer, and I really enjoyed it. I don't use it as much today, but I may get back to it. I've sort of missed some of the functions. The idea behind it is that you can start with a fixed sequence and have it slowly mutate over time. And that's a lot of fun. It's again, that's the idea of something that's going to surprise me. One thing I really like is this root knob, which will transpose the sequence diatonically. So it doesn't just raise the pitch, it raises it in the scale that you're working with. And that's great for variation. It's got a CV input for that. You can sort of have a melody going and then just have an instant variation that you know is going to fit in fairly well. And that's a lot of fun. It's great if you're just now getting into generative stuff, and it's fun to play with. So that's what I got for this time, and I hope you'll join me the next time I get to one of these. I think I've still got another 2 to go. I'll see you all next time. Take care.